29 November 2022. In this Skidmark, I'm going to talk about Putin and his meeting with the wives and mothers of the soldiers on the SMO. And then there's a little interesting project by a Russian photographer. This is one of those Warrafak moments, and Putin is the topic. Over the past months, 8-9 months, I had to make an adjustment in my mind after a lifetime of programming by the media and by the politicians, and I'm from the era where the red danger, the rooi gevaar, was absolutely hammered into us. But as the months went by, I became aware of the fact that we've been fed a lot of lies. And the way things are now, today, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I can say that I think the West has done us all in with the Russophobia and all the bullshit they've been feeding us. Earlier tonight I said to my wife that we were led to believe that the Russians were living in stone huts and dressed in bear skins, and they are basically cave people. The contrary is clear. And if I look at Putin as a president, as a statesman, I am of the opinion that at this point in time, if you take the West, the collective West, Putin is the only leader that deserves the title of a statesman. The rest, they are at best a lot of jokers. And there's a few things that Putin does that is impressive. First of all, he is not scared to sit down at a table and face the press and 20, 30, 40, 50 journalists in the room, and they've got a free hand at shooting questions at him as they want, and he answers everyone. And I am so impressed about his level of grasping situations and his knowledge of what's going on. And he faces those journalists and they carry on for as long as is needed. His last one that I saw was 4.5 hours. Show me one Western leader that can face an open session with 50 journalists for 4 hours. That Biden will not last 4 minutes. The rest of them, Macron, after 10 minutes there wouldn't be anything left to ask him, and the same for the German. And I don't even want to talk about that WEF administrator, governor of the UK, things like that. These are the things that is impressive. And then the fact that Putin is clearly in touch with the population of Russia, that is also impressive. Another thing is there's something like about 117 ethnic groups in Russia, and you don't hear of ethnic violence in Russia. You never hear of it. And I listened one night to a guy and they asked him about it, and he said yes, but here in Russia all cultures are respected, but above all we are all Russians. And I saw some images yesterday of Russian veterans of World War II, and the children that were bringing them flowers. It was amazing. And I thought to myself, a nation like that is unbeatable. They respect their citizens, they respect each other, and that is very important. If you look at what is going on in the West currently, they're godless, they are without morals, and in general, the West is in shambles. Gone are the days of Western societies being seen as civilized and pursuing good moral values. Those days are gone. Families means nothing to the West. Religion means nothing. And this is a pity. You look at Russia, they have just now passed that decree about the prohibition, promotion of gay shit to the public. You may not advertise it, you may not promote it, nothing at all. And you look at the role of the church in Russia, and you look at the amount and value that the Russians place on families, on children, on education, all good values that I grew up with. Now, none of that is left in the West. In America, the children in pre-primary schools are being exposed to this gender confusion shit. They are exposed to gay guys that are dancing for them, and cross-dressers, and all that type of absolute rubbish. But that is what the small children are exposed to. That doesn't happen in Russia, not at all. Russians look after their children, and Russians respect the women in their society for being mothers, for being wives, for being sisters. That is what the Russian society is like. And I have mentioned it previously in one of my Skidmarks that it would be so ironic if in the end Russia is the last custodian of good Western values. But let's come back to this meeting that Putin had with the mothers and the wives. Now here on this image you can see it's a hell of a long table, and there's a lot of women sitting at that table. We were sincerely moving towards this, Putin said, that the reunification of Russia with the Donbass should have happened earlier. Maybe there would not have been so many victims then. And how is that a leader admitting that they made a mistake? And if you look at this table, it is impressive. Now there were comments on this post, and this guy says, at least he's honest and can admit mistakes. Our US government would never do that. Next guy. Economically speaking, Russia wasn't ready economically to face all these sanctions, I guess. Now, to limit the casualties among the civilians, we have to finish this SMO quickly. It is good that he acknowledging he made a mistake. Here is one of the most powerful men in the world publicly admitting his mistakes. Russians consider themselves lucky to have such a president. In moments like this, Putin shows that he is a real leader. It takes a great courage to admit mistakes. Many men in important positions never admit mistakes, even when caught red-handed. Procrastination is always bad. When you know you have to do something you don't like, better to do it sooner rather than later. We all knew that Nazis in power in Kiev's sole purpose was to weaken Russia. Now here is a summary of what Putin discussed with the mothers and the wives. Russia is a unique civilization. Over the centuries, people have learned to respect each other's traditions, overcome hard times together. Russian military, including fighters from the Caucasus, are inherent in inadequately fulfilling their military duty. The important thing is that we are all mortals. Someday we will leave this world. The question is how we lived. Cossacks have always occupied a special place in the history of Russia. Putin promised to discuss the system of benefits for Donbass residents who have participated in the defense since 2014. The important thing is that we are all mortals. We will all leave this world. The question is how we lived. How important is that? Coming from the president. That says a lot about his character. The Russian Ministry of Defense is trying to organize work on uniforming military personnel in the SMO zone. We discuss this task with them daily. Ukrainians are used as cannon fodder. Those who refuse to follow orders are shot. We are dealing with a new Nazi regime. Now, there is people that is making a story about the fact that apparently there's a shortage of uniforms, warm uniforms, in the Donbass currently. And here he talks about it, he says they know that those militias of the Donbass were not kitted properly and they are busy sorting that out. So that is the facts. And I'm surprised about how many people they see, and especially I'm talking about South Africans, they see these things that the Nazis are doing there in the Ukraine, but they just keep on supporting the Ukraine. And then we get to this project by a Russian photographer. Behind each of our fighters stands a strong Russian woman, which means all of Russia. A Ryazan photographer launched the Heroes' Wives project. Angelika Denisova photographed wives and mothers of Ryazan servicemen. While husbands and sons defend Russia, women's shoulders hold the uniform with dignity, providing support and reliable rear. That is how the idea of the project was outlined by the author. And now I'm going to show you some of the photographs. It was a huge collection. I only took a few. And look at these shots. It is a good photographer. The lighting is good, but what impressed me is that she could capture the soul of that woman in that image. Here's another one. This is a younger wife, and I really like these photographs. And I think it is a great project that this photographer has undertaken, because we tend to look at the soldiers and never think about those that is left behind, those that are staying home, those that are sitting there every day waiting for a message or just some confirmation that their loved one is still alive. Now, I hope that you can look at these things and listen to these things with an open mind and think for a moment the hell that the citizens of the Donbass was put through since 2014. Living in an environment where your government is out to kill you, and they are bombing every day, shooting markets, shooting schools, shooting malls, shooting bus stops, and that is on defenseless citizens. Now, just a little bit of side information. The build-up of the troops in the Donbass is busy peaking. I heard earlier today that apparently the American intelligence services has checked the last 2 days on their satellite images, and they have identified about 580,000 Russian troops in the Donbass. Think about that. That crazy Zelensky better come to his senses and get to the negotiation table. Those crazy Europeans better come to their senses and fly to Moscow and go to Putin and say, sorry, we fucked up. How can we fix this? because it is clear. I read an article just before I did this one. I read an article in which the guy said it is quite possible that more Europeans will die in the next 4 months from cold than all the deaths in the Ukraine for the year so far. And on that note, think about these people. What is happening in the Ukraine is really not good. And it is a tragedy, it's a human tragedy. Those people will have no other option but to flee their country because they cannot go through this winter without power, without gas, without water. They cannot survive like that. And pretty soon, those dark cities are going to turn into hellholes. Because that Zelensky, right at the beginning, especially in Kiev, they released prisoners and they armed those prisoners. And those gangs are now having a royal time in that city. And on that note, please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your time.